Kalani Sitake and the Cougars hope to keep their dream season alive as they head north to the Hill for a showdown against the Utes. Your home for the best coverage of the Holy War is right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. This is JJ and Alex, presented by G2 Gene Bars on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back, everybody. It is JJ and Alex, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Want to remind you what's going on this week, of course. It's rivalry week here on the station. We want to encourage you to rival right. Am I saying this right?
You're doing great.
Rivalry right? Don't rivalry wrong, rivalry right.
Can we start a website called Rivalry Wrong?
You cannot. No, you cannot. Jeremy's like, I'm dumping this.
No, that idea is so poo-poo.
No, that idea is poo-poo. I'm telling you. We got to keep this rivalry on the up and up, brother. I think it is. Look, as soon as Bronco was out of the equation and Kalani and Kyle became, I told you this, on the field in 2018.
Everybody will always follow the direction of the head coach.
Yes. And it was so heated for so many years. And then to see after the game, the two coaches, the coaching staffs coming together, high-fiving and saying, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? That changed everything. And by the way, that makes it a better rivalry, I think. The guys know each other so much, they want to beat the heck out of each other even more.
Yeah.
I think that's a total truism right there. Joining us on the program to give us more truisms about this rivalry, he is David Nixon, former BYU defender, and, of course, best hair on BYU TV across the board. David, you've been voted in, so congratulations.
Hey, every year it just keeps fading and fading, so I'll take it now, knowing that in 5 years it all might be gone. I don't take it for granted.
Good.
You never take that for granted. There's so much to dig into here, David, and before we get into the rivalry stuff, let's just talk about this BYU season, because I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this season, and you've been a fan and you've been covering the team, so you have both perspectives. The last few years, it's been up and down in independence, and now you have this situation where you're in the Big 12, but last year didn't go well, and now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, is this dream season. What is it like for you both as someone who's covering it and somebody who played for this team to watch this team and this program do what they're doing this year?
I mean, obviously you couldn't ask for more, right? I mean, they're doing exactly what every fan would hope they could do, which is go out there and play complimentary football. Every phase of the game has gotten better throughout the season. And they're taking care of business. And a lot of times decisively, too, right? I mean, yes, Goonies has some nail-biters. The Oklahoma State game, clearly. But to go do what they did to Kansas State, to go down to UCF where they're dogs against UCF and put it on them as well, go up 17-0, I mean, they're playing dominating football. And I think that's the part that's fun and exciting is, yeah, they've had some nail-biters, which makes it fun. But they've also gone out there and taken care of business when they've been underdogs. And this team – I don't know. I talk a lot about it, but I think look back at last year, and that 5-game losing streak the BYU had to end the season has paid massive dividends. I think that what it did to that team last year was it humbled them and made them realize you can't take games for granted, even when you're ahead like you were at Oklahoma State in the season at halftime, I think up to 18 points. It just makes you realize that every minute counts, every game counts, and these guys go out there and play as if it's the last game of the year. I remember hearing one of the receivers, I think it was Darius Laster, one of the receivers we interviewed in our post-game show, he mentioned that Sitake tells them, or maybe it was A-Rod, tells them that every game is your Super Bowl. And that's how it is with football, right? I mean, football, you have 12 games, guaranteed 12 games, that's it. So you train all season, all off season, you have 12 chances to walk out there and perform. It's not like basketball or baseball where you have 30, 40 games. You only have 12 opportunities. And so I think this team goes out there and they don't take it for granted. They go out there and perform well, and it's been fun to watch them string it all together.
When you see kind of how this rivalry's taken shape, and now it's kind of the point where it's an in-conference matchup, and you obviously got to play against Utah as a member of the Mountain West. Like, what does just the conference mate aspect of this game add to it?
I mean, it's everything. I mean, you guys were mentioning how the rivalry has cooled off ever since Bronco left. I do wonder now that they are conference foes, does it pick back up a little bit? Does it add a little bit more spark to it? I would probably say yes. I mean, I look back and when we played Utah at the end of the season every year at that last game, it was usually to decide the Mountain West Conference Championship. Of course, this year it looks like that probably won't be the case in this game, not only because Utah's struggling, but also, they position the game with 4 games left. I would love to see them put it the last game of the year. I think that was kind of just a scheduling misstep by them. But, it's a huge game. And beyond just the emotions that go into it, now you start talking about conference implications, and it takes on kind of a new life of its own. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. Will it have the same vitriol and kind of hate that it had back in the day? Probably not, just given Kalani and Kyle's relationship and even Morgan's relationship, assuming that he takes it over in the future, his relationship with Kalani. But I do think it gets stepped up a little bit starting this year now that it means something. I mean, back in Independence and the Pac-12, it didn't mean much. It's kind of moved on. Yeah, you wanted to win it, but it didn't go against the win-loss or decide a conference championship per se. So we'll see how it plays out here in the future.
Yeah, David, I think that it's been a while since a BYU-Utah game has had so much at stake. And for BYU, this is everything. We know what's at stake with a college football playoff with a Big 12 championship on the line. Utah's desperate and hungry for a win. How do you think that dynamic plays out on Saturday with BYU having so much pressure on them to keep what's going, and then Utah feeling the pressure of trying to get a win and trying to get back to doing what they're used to doing, which is winning football games?
100%. I think that's why this game is so compelling, right? I mean, you look at BYU. Well, first of all, you look at the beginning of the season, and we all kind of circled this game saying, Utah is going to have everything to lose in this game because most likely they'd also be headed towards the college football playoff, and BYU be the underdogs. And, of course, the roles have been flipped or reversed. And so, now BYU's kind of got their target on their back. You've got Utah who's trying to dig themselves out of a 4-game losing streak. There's no better way to do that than to get your rivalry and to ruin their season per se, right? I mean, if I'm Utah, I'm looking at my chops. And, of course, if you're BYU, there is some pressure on you. But at the same time, I think this team, the way they performed under pressure this season tells you a lot about them. And I remember going and looking at this squad before the season began, and Vegas had the win totals 4.5 games, right? I remember going on record and saying, listen, I could see a path to 8 wins for this team. They'd have to perform well and play well, but I think they could get to 8 wins. And for me, it was because of the returning production. I mean, you look at this BYU team last year, and there were a ton of guys who got injured in the first, second, third game of the year that were starters, major contributors. And so those guys' seasons were over, or they had to rehab for the majority of the season. So all of a sudden, you had all these backups that now got significant playing time that came in, and they played the rest of the season. And you returned both those first and second stringers this year. And so now you've got the depth that we always talk about you need in the Big 12, and that's come along really well. And then, of course, those starters have come out and played tremendously. I mean, defensively, you look at that defensive line, the way they're playing with between Mangelston, Nelson, and Batty, and then the linebackers, which I'd argue maybe the best linebacking core that they've had there in a decade. BYU's had some good one-offs with of course, Fred Warner and Cal Van Noy and others. But as far as 3 starting backers, these guys are pretty amazing. And then you look at the secondary, one of the best pass efficiency defenses in the country. So if I'm Utah offensively that's struggling right now, there's not a lot of holes to pick in on this BYU defense right now. They're playing at a really high level.
So when you hear the Jake Retzlaff interviews that we've heard, and obviously being able to talk with these guys, the big theme all year long has been, oh, nobody else believed in us, but we did. This whole locker room knew we had something special in January. And there's a little part of me that goes, yeah, but there's also like a lot of teams across the country say, we knew we had it. We, in this locker room, we believed in ourselves. That happens for a lot of teams, but obviously not a lot of teams end up going 8-0 after that. How much of that has been learned along the way versus actually kind of being like, oh, no, we knew we were good at the beginning of the year?
I think all of it's been learned along the way. You got to give credit to Kalani and his coaching staff, and for them, like I said, coming off a 5-game losing streak, you're staring down the barrel last year of a 5-2 record. All you got to do is win 1 game to get the ball eligibility, and you don't. And for the fact to turn it around and go 8-0, guys, that's remarkable. I mean, because that's a pretty tough thing to rebound from those 5 losing games in a row at the end of the season. To all of a sudden go in the offseason and be able to rally the troops and have this type of turnaround. I mean, and so I understand why Vegas put the win total at what it was, right? Because it's so hard to do. But credit to Kalani and the rest of the coaching staff, and obviously credit to the players. These guys have bought in. And what's pretty impressive about this roster, frankly, is they didn't go out to the transfer portal. They didn't say, hey, we got to overhaul this whole roster. You look at the starters, all these guys were on the roster last year. Maybe there's 1 or 2 guys, Mark Collins on defense and a few others that have come in. But the majority of the starters were guys that were on the roster last year. They didn't say we have to go back and reinvent the wheel they believed in their team, and I think the kids bought in. I think they realized, hey, I don't have 3 transfers coming in to take my spot. The coaches believe in me, and they know I can do my job, and we can win games. And so I think that the culture that Kalani built there, without hitting the panic button, has, like I said, it's paid dividends. And it's fun to see this team really rally around each other. And I think that's been the biggest thing. You talk about unity. That's exactly what this team has right now. I think they believe in each other. They believe in the coaching staff. I think there's respect mutually both ways, and it shows on the field. These guys are playing fantastic football.
BYU ranked 9th in the first college football playoff rankings. What was your reaction?
I mean, it's about where I thought they'd be, considering that's where they were ranked the prior week. So it wasn't much of a surprise as far as the ranking goes. But listen, I'd be lying if I said that I'd look at every time I look at that little, the mock playoff bracket, and BYU is the 4th seed getting a first round bye. Like how amazing is that, right? I mean, it's unbelievable that they're in this position. And I've told other fellow fans, I go, listen, it's really, really difficult to run the table in college football, pro, anywhere. It's really difficult to go undefeated. BYU most likely will lose a game this year. The odds are stacked against them. They're going to lose a game probably somewhere along the way. So just enjoy this ride. It might be this week. It might be against Arizona State, right? It might be against Kansas at home. Who knows? But just enjoy the ride, because most likely it'll come to an end. But you have to enjoy this 8-0 season, this start they've had thus far, because it's remarkable, and it's been a blast. I mean, it's fun seeing your team top 10 in the country. It's taken so long to get back to this spot, but just enjoy it.
There's something that's been really interesting to watch too, and there is a culture situation at BYU that, I feel like has been just as big of a deal inside that locker room as just winning. But before we let you go here, David, when you see this team and you see them going up to Salt Lake, how is it that they can get the losing up at Rice-Eccles off of their back?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think it's been noted that a lot of these kids haven't played in this rivalry game. In fact, I don't think any of the kids have played up at Utah before. And so for them, I don't know if there's anything daunting about the records that have been held up there. But I think it just comes down to, just do what they've done throughout the rest of the season, which is, once again, when the cards have been stacked against them, when Vegas is counting them out and lines have been shifted all over the place, that they just go out there and perform and then do their jobs and kind of play for each other. I think this team, for me, the first 15 minutes of this game will be very telling. I think if BYU can jump out to a start like they did against UCF and just keep their foot on the gas pedal, then I think Utah, given the 4-game skid and given where they're at, they might tend to just probably, quit or kind of slump off a little bit. But I think if you give Utah any type of life in this game, given the fact that it's the rivalry game, this game can go either way. I mean, prior to the 2 prior meetings, there were 6 straight games of 1 score or less that the game was decided upon. So we know that these games are always tight. And for BYU, I think it's going to come down to that first 15 minutes, that first quarter. What type of start can they get off to? Are they taking care of the ball? Are they converting on third down? Are they putting up points? Are they one of the best teams in the country in red zone offense? Can they convert in the red zone? That's going to be the telltale sign.
David Nixon, former BYU linebacker, currently BYU TV analyst. David, thanks for hanging out with us, man. We appreciate it.